Okay, so this is the exciting bit. This is where we actually start trying to design the application, to sketch it out. So, as a designer, there are various tools you can use. So, when we talk about design, it can be everything from sketching, really the kind of stuff we're going to do this afternoon with pen and paper. It can be using wireframing programs like Azure or Balsamic, which are kind of computer-based ways of doing wireframing. It can be really early prototypes, so hacking things together in very basic code just to get it running on a web browser or a mobile phone browser. Then you get on to kind of much more sophisticated, kind of high fidelity designs. So that's the kind of stuff that you would do in a program like Photoshop or Fireworks or Adobe Illustrator. This is when you actually start really finessing the design and understanding what the icons would look like and what the exact colours you would use. And then you get to the launch ready stage where you have everything beautifully designed. And for something like Android, you would have multiple sizes, so you would have all the little icons and assets you need for small screens, medium resolution screens, high resolution screens, etc., etc. So those are the kind of the stages of design, but the one we're focusing on this afternoon is just that very first one, which is all just about sketching. It's just capturing the initial concept.
Okay, donc il y a plusieurs phases dans le design, ça va de l'union au final, l'idée c'est de par exemple travailler sur le logo ou la définition, la production des outils. Là, en l'occurrence, aujourd'hui on va plus travailler sur les prototypes, vraiment la phase brouillon et la phase basique pour
juste la meuf. Fais la plongée.
Okay, so some things about sketching. Right, so the next thing that every table is going to do is you're going to start sketching out what your application looks like. So what you should think about as you start sketching is just concentrate on getting the core ideas down. Don't get bogged down into the little details and the little intricacies. Just think about putting into your sketch the major bits of functionality that you want to cover. Don't worry about those little details. Always think about the user. So I was talking about this morning. Make sure that what you're designing is the most suitable tool that you can manage for your users. So think about how people are going to use this thing that you're sketching out. And lastly, have fun. This should be a nice activity. This is kind of free and easy opportunity. Like, there are no bad ideas at this stage. When you're sketching, anything's possible. All you're trying to do is get the best product at this point.
Okay, donc
So a typical project starts with a brief, so that's an idea of what we want to achieve in that project. We will then try and do some research, so that's the opportunity to gather as much information as possible around that subject. So the more knowledge we have to begin with, the better we can understand how to approach the brief. Then we will go into a design phase, where we'll come up with an initial response to what we've learned in the research and what we feel about the brief. We'll then go into some kind of build or prototyping stage. So in the early phases of a project, it's going to be the kind of stuff we do this afternoon, just kind of drawing stuff on paper. Later on in the project, that might be a little code prototype. Eventually, it'll be real production code. And then after that, you'll go to a test phase. So you will validate whether or not what you've currently built is serving the needs of the user and is doing what you hope it does. And then you'll just go around in this loop of design, build, test, as many times as it takes until you've got something you feel is appropriate, so that it's answering the initial brief. And then once you've done that as many times as needed, you get the amazing feeling when you can actually launch something.
Ok, donc Ben travaille chez Google en tant que spécialiste d'expérience utilisateur. Donc ça veut dire qu'à chaque fois qu'il y a un nouveau produit ou un nouveau lancement en fait, chez Google, et on va suivre exactement ce schéma. Donc le schéma commence avec toujours un brief, donc c'est en fait un résumé du produit qu'il va lancer, ou de l'outil qu'il va lancer. Ça ensuite une phase de recherche pour collecter le plus d'informations possible et avoir le plus de data pour lancer ensuite la phase de design. Et la phase de design, en fait, ça va être un cycle. Donc, vous allez commencer à designer designer l'outil, ensuite le construire, ensuite le tester, et quand ça ne convient pas, quand c'est pas parfait par rapport au produit et à la recherche que vous avez faite, ça va faire, vous allez faire une boucle. Vous pouvez faire la boucle autant de fois que vous voulez, du moment qu'à la fin, le résultat est parfait et correspond à ce que vous aviez prévu initialement. Et bien sûr, la phase finale, c'est la phase.
Okay, so that's the kind of the brief overview. Now, here's the brief that we're going to be working on this afternoon. So, I'll read it out. So, what we're going to do is design a tool, and it's going to be a mobile application. That's what we're looking to design, is a mobile application to report what is good or bad. So that school children can report what's good or bad about their school. And we're not just talking about the lessons, we're talking also about the building, whether the facilities in the school are good, whether they have good facilities in a good building, and they can do well in their lessons. And the reason we're interested in this is that this will allow those interested in improving access to education to gather the data. So we want to provide this app to school children. They can report the situation in their school, and then the people that are making education policy can understand what is working well for children in one area, which bits need to be improved.
Et donc votre cas pratique aujourd'hui, ça va être ça c'est votre brief en fait. Donc votre idée, ça va être de lancer une application mobile qui va permettre aux étudiants de reporter ce qui est bien ou mauvais dans leur école. Le but de l'application, en fait, c'est de pouvoir collecter de l'information pour, on va dire, le ministère de l'Éducation ou une organisation qui s'occupe de l'éducation. Et le but, c'est justement de mettre en application cet outil dans les écoles pour que eux puissent avoir le plus d'informations possible et améliorer ce qui se passe dans les écoles. Donc,
okay, that's a good question. How's it going to happen? So the first thing, if we were doing this process in a real world environment, the first thing you would think about is what are the user needs. So you've had the brief, and then you start thinking about how do I react to this brief? What needs do my users have? So what do you know about the users? Who are the people who are going to use the app? What do you know about them? What do you need to know? What are the bits that you're missing about that knowledge? What can you find out about their current behaviours? So, for example, who can tell me what would be a useful thing to know about current behaviour of the school children?
What they like to do during class?
Yeah, what they like to do, yeah, very good. Anyone else?
Qu'est-ce que vous avez besoin de savoir sur ces petits partenaires sur les étudiants? Quelles sont les questions que vous devez poser?
Yeah, that's good. Also, if we want people to report information about what's happening in their school, how do you think that they would report that information?
De l'application, c'est de reporter ce qui se passe dans l'école. Comment tu penses intégrer l'accès timing qui va apporter ce qu'on dit dans l'école? Comment on peut apporter la suite à
Do you think they would write it on the postcard and send it? Do you think they might use a computer, they might use a phone?
C'est quoi les moyens plus simples en fait de leur demander ces informations? Leur demander d'écrire une carte postale, d'envoyer un email, c'est quoi
Yeah, so I think, given the fact that most school children have a phone now, then it would be good to think about an application that runs on the phone. So these are the kind of things we need to start thinking about as we look at the brief. We start trying to understand as much as possible about what we're trying to design for. So there are ways that you gather this information that you're looking for. So the techniques that we would use as user experience designers would be things like interviews. So therefore, we would go to a school and we would sit with the children in the school and ask them the questions that just came from the audience here about what time do you go to school, what time are your lessons, what device do you have with you, how do you report it, would you like to write it in words, would you like to take a photo? So those are the kind of things we would get through interviews. Their posture. We can look at these other things and see if we can learn any lessons from the way that they're behaving. And then we can also use techniques like feedback forms and user feedback. So if we already know that a lot of school children are using Facebook to talk to their friends or using Google Plus or whatever it is, then maybe we could put a post on that social network and ask them to give us information. So these are all ways that we can gather as much data as possible to inform the way that we make the design.
Il y a plusieurs moyens en fait de collecter les données sur nos utilisateurs. Le premier, c'est de faire une interview avec la personne. Donc c'est un entretien, vous posez toutes les questions que vous avez besoin. Il y a aussi une partie d'analyse de données. Donc vérifier que je peux faire par exemple sur les réseaux sociaux, vous avez un compte sur les outils ou les plateformes que vos utilisateurs utilisent. Vous pouvez essayer de collecter des données sur ces plateformes-là. Il y a une partie aussi qui s'appelle le benchmark, donc vous allez en fait regarder ce que les concurrents, ça va bien, ce que vos concurrents ou ce que une entreprise similaire aura déjà fait en fait sur le marché. Donc il faut l'exemple des transports publics. Si quelqu'un a déjà fait ce type d'outils pour évaluer les transports publics, il va falloir s'en inspirer, voir comment ils l'ont créé, etc. Et ensuite, il y a un moyen d'utiliser très efficace, c'est ce qui est feedback et les forums utilisateurs, où là vous pouvez avoir des commentaires qui sont donnés directement par les utilisateurs.
Okay, so we're just going to look at one of those techniques now. We're going to talk about user interviews. So, if you're going to interview somebody, I mentioned this morning, the most important thing about being a user experience designer is to be able to ask questions that allow people to really express their opinion. So, when you're interviewing a user, what you want to do is create an atmosphere whereby they feel comfortable and they're sharing as much information as possible. So, to do that, you need to stand back with your own opinion. So, if they say something and you don't agree with it, then that's fine. You just need to ask them to explain more. Always ask them another question to bring out more information. Don't try and start an argument or a discussion with them. Just try and make sure they're sharing as much information as possible with you. Come in with an open mind. Don't come in expecting that you already know the answer. Come in with the mindset that you don't know, and you're prepared to hear any answer, and anything might be right or wrong, and be open to that possibility. Ask what we call open-ended questions. So ask questions that allow people to respond with more than just yes or no. Ask questions that allow people to say whole sentences and paragraphs about why they feel the way they feel, or why they use something the way they use it. As I said, listen, don't talk, give them the opportunity. If they say something that strikes you as interesting, then ask them another question about it. Don't just kind of think, oh, that's interesting, and forget about it. Always try and explore a little bit further. If somebody says, oh, I never take the bus, I always walk, then say, oh, why do you walk? How far do you like to walk? What happens when it's raining? And just ask more and more, because the more questions you ask, the more you understand the total picture around what their life is and what their experience is. And then the obvious thing is to try and make notes as well. So as you talk to somebody, try and capture as much of the conversation as possible.
Ok, donc Ben il donnait des conseils en fait comment mener, comment guider votre interview. Donc ce qui est bien, c'est de déjà mettre un peu la personne dans l'ambiance. Le but, c'est que la personne elle donne le plus d'informations possible. Donc, il faut que la personne soit à l'aise, il faut que ce soit comme une conversation. Ensuite, ce que je disais, c'est qu'il faut garder en fait l'esprit ouvert. Si la personne dit quelque chose qui est contraire à ce que vous pensez, il faut que vous restiez le plus neutre possible. Le but, c'est de faire parler la personne et qu'elle donne son opinion, et pas de rentrer en conflit. Donc, l'idée, c'est de rester le plus neutre possible, poser des questions ouvertes et de collecter le plus d'informations possible. C'est ce qui est là, c'est l'autre. Donc, le but, c'est vraiment de faire parler la personne le plus possible. Votre but, c'est d'écouter le plus possible. Et
so, if they say something and it suggests something that's follow-up.
Donc, c'est pareil, donc, quand vous posez des questions, les questions le plus vagues possible, que vous puissiez rebondir. Donc, si vous prenez l'exemple de si vous demandez à la personne si elle prend le bus le matin et que vous dites non, je marche, ça va vous dire ah bon, pourquoi vous marchez qu'est-ce qui se passe quand il pleut? Est-ce que vous marchez toujours? Combien de temps ça vous prend pour aller à l'école, etc. Donc, le but, c'est vraiment de rebondir, de poser le plus de questions possible, d'avoir le plus d'informations possible. Et la dernière partie, c'est de forcément prendre des notes, tout documenter et garder une trace de l'entretien que vous allez avoir.
Okay, great. So, does anybody feel brave? Would anyone like to volunteer to come and try an interview with me?
Volontaire pour faire un entretien avec elle?
Yeah, excellent.
Hein?
Thank you very much. So, what we're going to do is we're going to practice an interview. So, we're going to pretend that you are a student at school. And so this is the brief. So, as an experienced designer, I want to talk to Giacomo and find out as much as possible about his experience at school. And if you could just pretend to be a school child, that would be good. So just remember that when you're in school. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you spending time with me.
Okay.
So, I'm a researcher, I'm working at Google, and I'm interested to build a new product, and this product is going to be to help children in school report something about the environment of their school, the condition of the building and teaching they get. So I'd like to ask you a few questions. Is that okay? Great, thank you. So, how old are you?
I'm 20.
Okay, and what are you studying at school?
I'm studying computer science, but like the management of companies.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and what year are you in school? What year are you in school?
Second year.
Okay, and have you stayed in the same school or have you switched schools?
I'm doing my next year. I will have my license.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, I will continue in the same school, or I will school.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and do you enjoy being in school? Do you enjoy being in school?
Being.
Do you enjoy?
Enjoy.
Do you like? Do you like school?
Of course. That's why I'm here.
There's no, of course. And do you think that the quality of the school is good? The teaching is good?
Yes, I am either my school is the first business school in Sub-Saharan Africa.
Mm-hmm. And why did you choose to go to that school?
After my A-level, because after the first of the two guys in the Dakar was doing my exam, they proposed me to scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
Because I got A+ grade at the A-level.
That's great. You're obviously a very smart man. So, and what about the condition of the building? Do you think the facilities are good in your school?
Yes, for my class we are 20. There are so many materials, computers. Just brief, yes. You have to complete your PC, your personal computer. Which become as well as materials.
Okay, and your personal computer, how long have you owned that?
After the last year, Sony Vaio.
So why did you choose Sony Vaio?
Il arrive à aspirer en fait toutes les informations possibles et à récolter beaucoup de données.
Okay, so the way the process works is as you interview people and as you kind of gather as much information as possible. So ideally, if we were trying to design this app for school children, we would go and we would talk to, 5, 10, 15, 20 school children, as many as we had time and effort to try and gather as many different viewpoints as possible. And what you would do is, throughout that note-taking experience, like everyone you talk to, you take notes, and then you try and form that into sort of rough areas where you think the product might want to be. And that's what we use post-it notes. So I think most desks will have some post-it notes. And it's a really nice way of capturing a thought, because it's a small piece of paper, you can't fit too much on it. But you can just put the key statements you want to get. So, it could be like, having spoken to 20 interviews, we say we want to have, we want to make sure we have a social network. So we just have, add a social hook, or we're doing an application with a map. So it's really important that the locations are on the map. And just use the post-it notes just to kind of highlight all the key features that you want to cover. Yes.
Donc l'idée quand on fait les entretiens, c'est d'avoir en fait 4, 5 choses principales que vous voulez absolument savoir. Puis l'idée c'est bien d'utiliser les post-it parce que ça vous donne vraiment quelques points importants que vous pouvez retirer de l'interview. Là, par exemple, si on devait faire ce cas pratique en réel, il faudrait aller poser donc, ces questions à 10-15 étudiants, et à chaque fois pour les 10-15 étudiants, il faut avoir donc, ces points importants en tête, sur les informations principales que vous voulez retirer de l'entreprise.
Okay, so the next thing we want to go on to, so suppose that we've done the research, right? I've done the research for you. So I've been out, I've spoken to 20 students, and this is the results of the research. So this is what you're going to use to inform how you start designing the application you're going to do this afternoon.
Donc là, on imagine qu'on a déjà posé donc, des questions aux 10-15 étudiants. Et ça, en fait, c'est les informations qu'on a réussi à retirer.
Yeah, sure.
Donc, vous allez en fait cibler des jeunes qui ont entre 12 et 18 ans, à la fois des garçons et des filles. Le Galaxy Pocket, apparemment, est le téléphone le plus utilisé. Des utilisateurs les gros utilisateurs d'applications comme Instagram et Vine l'utilisent déjà en fait pour partager et faire des commentaires. Les étudiants à qui on a parlé, ils aiment bien recevoir en fait des récompenses quand ils font ce genre d'effort. Et c'est des récompenses du type badge ou Ah ok, donc c'est un classement en fait. Ils aiment bien être un peu l'esprit de compétition, ils aiment bien avoir un classement des badges. Et ils portent beaucoup d'intérêt à leur éducation. Et ils veulent, eux, ils attendent que l'éducation devienne meilleure et qu'elle soit plus accessible à tous. Et Et ils ont en fait des commentaires à faire passer à la fois sur les leçons, sur la qualité des leçons, et aussi sur les locaux et le matériel à l'école.
Okay, so we're just going to take 5 minutes now. I want every table to spend 5 minutes and just think about what we know about the brief and what we know about the participants, the users of our product, and just start writing down in the post-it notes what other information you need to think about, like how does the combination of the brief and this information about your users, what questions does it start in your mind, what things does it make you think about? And we're just going to spend 5 minutes and then we're just going to go each table and just say 1 or 2 things on each table that you start thinking how you're going to design your application there.
Donc là, à partir du brief que vous avez eu et des résultats des entretiens, vous allez commencer à travailler en groupe et à vous poser en fait les principales questions et les principaux points qui vous manquent pour créer cet outil. Donc allez-y, vous pouvez commencer à travailler et ensuite elle passera dans les rangs et on demandera à chacun des groupes quelles sont les grandes questions qui restent à se poser avant de créer l'outil.
Okay, so 5 minutes.
Do you have an example for this more concrete?
Okay, so an example could be okay, so yeah, an example in a different environment. So if we're talking about public transport, and we know that we're designing for a public transport app, then one of the questions I might ask myself is whether cost is an issue, right? Is the reason the person isn't taking the public transport every day and some days they walk? I think to myself, is that because they like to walk? Or is it because maybe they can't afford to get the bus every day? So that's an example in a different context. We try and think about this.
Ok, donc là, il vous donne un exemple de questions qu'on doit se poser. Donc, s'il prend l'exemple des transports publics, une des questions qu'on doit se poser, c'est est-ce que les gens ne prennent pas le bus? Est-ce que le prix est un problème? Est-ce que c'est parce que ça coûte trop cher qu'ils ne prennent pas le bus? Donc là, vous vous remettez dans le contexte et que vous posez un peu les mêmes questions avec le brief et avec les réponses des entretiens que vous avez eus. C'est clair pour tout le monde?
On a imaginé les interviews.
Non, les interviews ont déjà été posées. Maintenant, on est dans la conception de l'outil et vous pouvez vous poser des questions un peu, des questions importantes qui expliqueraient pourquoi. Like they're asking if they have to write interview questions, but that's not the point. It's asking important questions to design before designing your product. Right?
Yeah, it's how they react to briefing and to what does that make them think about how they listen to
Okay, so in your example for public transport, the question is why are people using public transport? In that case, what is the question?
I might want to say, how do I start gathering this information in my mobile app? Do I want people just to take photographs? Do I want people to write a lot of text? Do I want people to choose from a multiple choice on a form? What kind of app do I want to build? Do I want to build something that feels like a game for people? Or do I want to build something that feels like a serious business tool? So those are the kind of questions that I would start with.
Non, en fait, désolé, c'est ma faute. En fait, là, ce que vous devez faire, c'est essayer de trouver les grandes questions que vous vous posez avant de passer les entretiens. Donc, avant de rédiger les questions que vous allez poser aux gens pour les entretiens, il faut que vous puissiez lister, en fait, qu'est-ce que vous cherchez à savoir. Donc, là, il a donné quelques exemples, et maintenant, vous pouvez travailler en groupe pour savoir quelles informations vous avez besoin de retirer des entretiens que vous allez mener.
Okay, so just have a few minutes and see if you can think of more things like this that you want to try and factor into the design.